Methuselah is one of those figures in the Bible who often gets mentioned, but rarely gets much attention. He's famous for one thing, being the longest-lived human in the Bible. But if you think about it, a life that stretches almost 1,000 years, 969 years to be exact, must have been filled with experiences we can barely imagine. What must he have seen, or learned, or endured in all those years? The Bible doesn't give us many details. All we get is one simple line, and all the days of Methuselah were 969 years, and he died. Genesis 5 verse 27, King James Version. And that's it. But there's so much mystery packed into his story. Methuselah sits in a unique spot on the family tree in the early chapters of Genesis, connected to a lineage of people who lived long, extraordinary lives and had these almost mythical encounters with the divine. It was a time when humans still felt close to their origins. A younger, wilder world, not yet so far removed from Eden. Methuselah's roots go all the way back to Adam and Eve, who, after Cain and Abel, had other children. As their family grew, civilization itself began to take shape. Genesis gives us a glimpse of this, saying, "After he became the father of Seth, Adam lived 800 years and had other sons and daughters." Genesis 5 verse 4. Imagine generations upon generations, each one teaching the next about the earth, about animals, about their connection to God. And somewhere along this line, we meet Methuselah's father, a man named Enoch. Now Enoch wasn't like the others. While people of that time often strayed from God, Enoch had this deep, almost mysterious relationship with the divine. He was a prophet, yes, but he was also a man who lived in such close communion with God that he didn't even die. The Bible tells us Enoch lived 65 years and begat Methuselah. After he begat Methuselah, Enoch walked with God 300 years and had sons and daughters. So all the days of Enoch were 365 years. And Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. Genesis 5, verse 21-24, New King James Version. It's almost as if Enoch's life was too sacred, too otherworldly, for a regular ending. And Methuselah, his son, was left to carry on this legacy, this connection to both the earthly and the divine. This verse paints a vivid picture of the relationship between Enoch and God, a bond so close that Enoch was taken up to heaven instead of dying. Because of this, Enoch's family had a unique place in biblical history, a lineage marked by faith and righteousness. And at the heart of it all was Methuselah, blessed with nearly 1,000 years of life. Almost like he was a bridge between two worlds, he became the grandfather of Noah, one of the most famous figures in the Bible. As the world grew darker and more corrupt, Methuselah's own son, Lamech, lived 182 years before he had a son himself, and he named this boy Noah. We all know the story of Noah, the man chosen by God to build the ark that would save his family and a collection of animals from the great flood that was coming to cleanse the earth. So in a way, Methuselah wasn't just a man who lived a long life. He was part of a family with a divine purpose. Methuselah lived in an age of increasing wickedness, but his father Enoch wasn't silent about it. He warned people of a coming judgment. In the New Testament, we get a glimpse of one of Enoch's prophecies recorded in the book of Jude. Enoch, the seventh from Adam, prophesied about them. "See, the Lord is coming with thousands upon thousands of his holy ones to judge everyone, and to convict all of them of the ungodly acts they have committed in their ungodliness, and of all the defiant words ungodly sinners have spoken against him." Jude 14:15. Enoch's message was clear. God's patience had limits, and there would be consequences for all this ungodliness. And when Enoch was 65, he had a son. This child was given a name with a prophetic meaning. When he dies, it will happen. In the original language, names in the Bible often had layers of meaning, sometimes even serving as a hint of what was to come. Think of Adam, whose name means of the earth, because he was created from the dust. Or Nabal, whose name means fool, a fitting description of his character. So Methuselah's name was more than just a name. It was a warning. God, in his patience, allowed Methuselah to live longer than any other human recorded, almost as if to hold off judgment as long as possible. It's incredible when you think about it. God delayed the flood for nearly 1,000 years, waiting and giving people time to turn back. Finally, after 969 years, Methuselah passed away. And it wasn't long after that maybe even the very day he died, that the rains began to fall. His grandson Noah, who had been preparing for this moment, was ready with the ark. Methuselah's life and death were more than just a long stretch of years. They were part of a divine countdown, a symbol of God's patience, and also a reminder that judgment, once promised, would eventually come. Methuselah isn't just famous for living to an extraordinary age. His name holds an intriguing layer of meaning as well. In the Bible, where symbolism is woven through so many stories, Methuselah's life seems to be tied to a major event in human history. The timing of his death is actually significant, hinting at a deeper design in the biblical narrative, where even a name can carry hidden weight. When you line up the ages of the patriarchs, something remarkable appears. The year Methuselah died is the same year the flood happened. Now, a lot of people think Methuselah drowned in the flood, but that's not true. He actually passed away right before it. His father, Enoch, a man who walked with God, raised Methuselah, and he knew about the coming judgment. Even Noah, who spent 120 years building the ark, understood that Methuselah's name suggested that God's judgment would come soon after his death. Methuselah's long life tells us something about God's patience and mercy. God is rich in mercy, a phrase that almost seems to counterbalance humanity's richness in sin. God didn't just write us off. Instead, he had a plan to redeem us, flawed as we are. Mercy, after all, is forgiveness extended to someone who doesn't deserve it, a kind of undeserved pardon. That's the only way to explain Christ's sacrifice for humanity. Humans can show mercy too, but it's limited. God's forgiveness, on the other hand, shows a mercy that goes beyond anything we could ever offer. Even while Methuselah's father Enoch and his grandson Noah warned people of the coming flood, they were mostly met with mockery. People just laughed it off. And that theme, the disregard and disbelief, is one that stretches from Methuselah's time right into ours. The flood in Methuselah's time and the fire in the end times share a similar message. The Bible warns that in the last days there will be scoffers, people who mock the idea of Jesus returning. In 2 Peter 3 verse 3-4 it says, "In the last days mockers will come, following their own desires and saying, 'Where is the promise of his coming?' Everything's been the same since the beginning of creation." So, it really shouldn't surprise Christians when people today roll their eyes at the idea of Jesus returning someday. Peter warned us that this would happen. Skeptics probably laughed at Noah too. Imagine building an ark for 120 years while people walked by and thought you were crazy. To them, 120 years felt like forever. And now, 2,000 years after Christ, there are plenty who think we're foolish for waiting on his return. The story these mockers tell is built on this idea that everything has always been the same as it is now, that God hasn't acted in the past and won't act in the future to change the course of creation. They're missing the point. They forget that long ago, by the very word of God, the heavens and earth came into being. The earth was formed out of water and by water, and then, through that same water, the whole world was destroyed in a massive flood. But now, by that same word, the current heavens and earth are being held back, reserved for a future judgment by fire. It's being kept for a day when God will bring justice and deal with those who've rejected him. 2 Peter 3 verse 5-7. When God first created the earth, it looked one way. After the flood, it looked completely different. And he's promised that one day it'll change again, not by water this time, but by fire. So we shouldn't brush off God's promise just because we don't see it happening immediately. The same word that created everything and once judged the world with water will someday bring a judgment by fire. The flood taught us something powerful. We live in a moral universe where sin won't go unpunished forever. Jesus even referenced the flood to make this point. But some people ignore it, acting as if that lesson doesn't apply to them. What feels like forever to us is just a moment to God. It's like how an hour feels endless to a child, but it's nothing to an adult. God isn't slow to fulfill his promises. He's patient. He gives us as much time as possible to turn back to him. If it seems like he's delaying, it's only because he's merciful, not because he's forgotten. We're living in a time of mercy, much like the long life of Methuselah was a symbol of God's patience before the flood. Think about it. Many people today, even Christians, are grateful that Jesus didn't come back 10 years ago, or 5 years ago, or even last year. God's timing has been merciful, giving us more chances than we might realize. Peter gives us a glimpse into God's heart here, reminding us of his words, "As surely as I live, declares the Lord, I take no pleasure in the death of the wicked, but rather that they turn from their ways and live." Ezekiel 33 verse 11. Just like the incredibly long life of Methuselah, God's patience might make it seem like he's taking his time. But that's not the case. He's simply giving people more chances to turn to him. Eventually, though, Jesus will return. And when he does, it'll be sudden, like a thief in the night, catching people off guard. When that moment comes, it's going to change everything. The skies will disappear with a deafening roar, and the very elements of this world will burn and melt away. It'll be a total transformation. In Noah's time, people scoffed and mocked too, and in the end, God had to start over. The only one left standing was Noah, the single righteous person in a world that had completely lost its way. The Bible describes it like this: "The Lord saw that human wickedness was widespread on the earth, and that every intention of their hearts was only evil all the time. So the Lord regretted that he had made mankind, and it grieved him deeply. Then God said, I will wipe out mankind, whom I created, from the face of the earth, people, animals, everything that crawls, and birds of the sky, because I regret making them. But Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord." Genesis 6 verse 5 to 8. Today, we're seeing more and more people mocking the idea of faith. It seems like skepticism is everywhere, and there are a lot of reasons for that. Society has drifted so far from the teachings of the Bible that many people don't even have a sense of right or wrong anymore. In a world like this, anyone who stands up for what they believe to be true is often ridiculed. During Methuselah's time, the world was very different. He lived for hundreds of years, and in that time, the earth went through dramatic changes, not just in its landscape, but in the hearts of people. Humanity, once pure and innocent, began to spiral deeper into wickedness and rebellion. The Bible says, "The Lord saw that human wickedness was great on the earth, and that every thought in their hearts was only evil continually." Genesis 6 verse 5, KJV. It's as if humanity had completely lost its way, moving further from God and closer to chaos. In the midst of all this darkness, there was one good man, Noah. He was Methuselah's grandson, and even when everyone else around him was going down the wrong path, Noah stayed true. Because of his faith, God shared his plan with Noah. He would send a massive flood to cleanse the earth and start fresh. But God, in his mercy, gave Noah a way out. He told him to build a huge ark to keep his family and 2 of every kind of animal safe from the coming flood. God said, "I will establish my covenant with you, and you shall come into the ark, you, your sons, your wife, and your sons' wives with you." Genesis 6 verse 18, KJV. While the rest of the world continued in its self-destructive ways, unaware of the disaster looming over them, Noah and his family quietly prepared for the storm. Methuselah's life came to an end just as the flood was about to begin, almost as if marking the close of an era. The early chapters of Genesis, especially Genesis 6 verse 1 to 5, paint a vivid picture of the world before the flood. It wasn't a place of peace or kindness. It was a world filled with violence, corruption, and sin. People were consumed by their own desires, doing whatever they wanted without a thought for others. Honesty, integrity, kindness, these weren't values anyone cared about. Instead, deceit and selfishness ruled the day. Everyone is out for themselves, and the very fabric of society is torn apart by selfishness and wickedness. In such an environment, families are not sanctuaries of love and support, but battlefields of deceit and betrayal. Neighbors don't look out for each other. They look to exploit one another. Governments are not institutions of justice, but rather systems of oppression, upholding the rule of the powerful over the weak. Now insert into this chaotic world an unusual development: the Nephilim. The Bible says, "The sons of God saw that the daughters of humans were beautiful, and they married any of them they chose." Genesis 6 verse 2, New International Version. These sons of God are often interpreted as fallen angels, though the term is somewhat ambiguous. The offspring of these unions, the Nephilim, were the heroes of old, men of renown. Genesis 6 verse 4. The Nephilim were special and not like regular people. They were strong and large, but worsened the world's problems. They were admired, feared, and perhaps even worshipped, pulling people further away from the true God who had created them. Their might made them objects of fascination, but they were part of a world spiraling further into chaos and sin. It was in this context that God saw the wickedness of humanity. But even amid this dark chapter of human history, there was a glimmer of hope. A man named Noah who found favor in the eyes of the Lord. Genesis 6 verse 8. Methuselah lived in the time of Noah, which meant he lived in the end times of his world. So to know the world during Methuselah's time is to know the world during Noah's time. What was the time of Noah like? Just as it happened in the days of Noah, so it will also be in the days of the Son of Man. People were eating, they were drinking, they were marrying, and they were being given in marriage until the day that Noah entered the ark, and the flood came and destroyed them all. Luke 17 verse 26 to 27, Amplified Bible. This was also the time of Methuselah. Everyone just carried on with their life. We are also in the times of Methuselah. The world keeps moving on, even though we are in the last days. All things continued as normal, that is, until Noah and his family entered the ark, at which time the cataclysms came and destroyed all the people. Jesus didn't say that everything would be fine, or that there wouldn't be any problems. Conditions before the flood and before the judgment of Sodom and Gomorrah were terrible, but the wickedness was accepted as usual and routine. The word translated revealed is apocalypto, our modern word apocalypse. But the ancient Greek word has the idea of revealing or unveiling. When Noah's flood came, one could imagine people trying to keep their possessions safe while they perished vainly. Even so, if one is ready for Jesus' coming, they will not be concerned about the material things left behind. Their heart's focus shouldn't be on what's in the house, but on what's in heaven. There will come a time when all of your opportunity to obey God will be gone. Some individuals scoff at preaching and teaching about hell or any impending judgment. They perceive it as scare tactics intended to frighten children and fools. We are too wise to believe it, they say. More than any other subject, Jesus spoke about hell. Consider the innumerable examples of people who had the opportunity to do the right thing and then lost that opportunity forever. The rapture of the church is the next event on God's prophetic timeline. It is one of the Christian faith's great hopes and is shrouded in mystery. When will it happen? What will the experience be like? What does the Bible teach on the rapture? When the Lord returns, descending from heaven, his appearance and the rising of his people to meet him in the air will be visible to the entire world, an event known as the rapture. There is one final aspect of the last days that Jesus points to, and it was present in the societies of both Noah and Lot. Jesus mentions 8 specific activities: eating, drinking, marrying, giving in marriage, buying, selling, building, and planting. There is nothing intrinsically sinful about any of those activities. So what was the problem? The problem was they were so immersed in those activities that they did not recognize the days in which they were living. I would sum up that problem in one word: materialism. They were so immersed in the material that they no longer had any understanding or alertness for the spiritual and the eternal. The final feature of the days of Noah and Lot, then, was materialism. How much materialism is there in the world today? I would say Western civilization is virtually inundated with it, and it is by no means excluded from the church. Many professing Christians are just as materialistic in their hearts as unbelievers. The days of Noah. The parallel account in Luke 17 verse 26 gives this wording: "Just as it was in the days of Noah, so also will it be in the days of the Son of Man." To comprehend the days before Jesus' return, therefore, we need to find out what the days of Noah were like. For an account of those days, we will examine the book of Genesis for the essential elements. We have presented the evil elements evident in the days of Noah and Lot. As we have seen, various forms of evil were rampant. However, it would be wrong for me to close this picture of the days of Noah and Lot without also showing the positive side of the picture, because there was a positive side in 2 main respects. There is an excellent side to the days of Noah. For Genesis 6 verse 9 says, "These are the generations of Noah. Noah was a just man and perfect in his generations, and Noah walked with God." There was one man among all those people who had an intimate, personal relationship with God. God could speak to him and tell him how he viewed the situation and the judgment he would bring. As believers, Noah sets a pattern that we must follow. Noah and his family were the only survivors of that tragedy. It seems clear to me that only those who live like Noah and his family will survive today. Noah was not left in ignorance of what was coming. As God's faithful servant, he received directly from God's supernatural revelation of what would happen on the earth and how he and his family could prepare for it, face it, and survive. God warned Noah and showed him a way through. Just as the harmful elements of the story apply to the present time, so should this positive element. We are confronted with enormous dangers, catastrophes, and judgments that we cannot fully measure or identify. But amid everything, I believe that God will still warn his faithful servants and show them a way of survival. Specific details of Methuselah's life remain scarce in the scriptures, but one thing is sure: he lived through an era unlike any other, witnessing a world we can only imagine. Methuselah's legacy extended beyond just his impressive years. His lineage carried forward to Noah, his grandson. The human story would be forever changed through Noah, as he became the beacon of hope and survival during the Great Flood. And Noah was 500 years old, and Noah begat Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Genesis 5 verse 32, King James Version. Thus, through Methuselah's line, humanity was given a second chance, setting the stage for a new chapter in the grand narrative of mankind. Methuselah's longevity in the Bible, between stories of big floods, burning bushes, and huge giants, stirs the imagination of scholars, theologians, and lay people alike. Many have speculated on the reasons for his longevity. Was it a literal age or symbolic? Was it a testament to the conditions of the early earth, or perhaps a special blessing from God? Yet beyond the numbers and speculations lies a deeper spiritual lesson. Methuselah's long life is a beacon of God's patience and mercy. In an age when humanity was spiraling into wickedness, the long life of Methuselah stood as a reminder that God's grace was still at work, holding back the floodwaters of judgment for a time. In this sense, his life symbolizes that even amid the increasing wickedness of humanity, God's patience and mercy prevailed, offering hope and a chance for redemption. Even though we don't know a lot about what happened in Methuselah's life, his story gives us many interesting lessons that people still think about today. Methuselah's staggering lifespan prompts one to reflect on the value of time. How do we use the days we are given? It's not about how long we live, but how we use our time. Even for Methuselah, life eventually ended. This story reminds us of the brevity of existence, even for the longest lived among us. Teach us to number our days, that we may gain a heart of wisdom. Psalm 90 verse 12. Methuselah was the grandfather of Noah, the man chosen by God to build the ark. Through Methuselah's lineage, humanity was saved from the great flood. This teaches us that our legacy isn't just about our achievements, but also about how we influence and guide the generations after us. Methuselah's name could allude to the flood coming after his passing. This interpretation lends to the notion of divine timing and trusting in God's greater plan. Much like Proverbs 3 verse 5-6 suggests, "Trust in the Lord with all thine heart, and lean not unto thine own understanding. In all thy ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy paths." As mentioned earlier, Methuselah lived in a time when the wickedness of man was great, and yet he was graced with longevity. His life served as a testament to the mystery of God's grace and mercy, a theme echoed in Ephesians 2 verse 8-9. "For by grace are ye saved through faith, and that not of yourselves, it is the gift of God, not of works, lest any man should boast." Methuselah, within the vast stories of the Bible, is a man whose life is commonly pushed to the side. Methuselah is the longest-lived human in the Bible. Imagine all he would have seen, experienced, and learned in those years. The Bible says plainly, "And all the days of Methuselah were 969 years, and he died." Genesis 5 verse 27, King James Version. However, there are many mysteries in his life that many miss.